And we're back in our basement home gym, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this early Sunday morning. What am I doing here? What am I even doing awake here with me in New York? But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. We have another baseball anniversary, and it's fitting because the 2025 World Series is now tied at one game apiece. The Blue Jays shocked a lot of people, but not me, in actually winning a game. Apparently, this Dodgers team, in the estimation of a lot of people, with their 93 wins, the 93-win 2025 Los Angeles Dodgers, the same number of wins as the 1970 New York Yankees, 93 and 69, which was good for the 15 games out of first place, and the Yankees the season was over in April with their amazing 93-win team. But somehow, this juggernaut, 93-win Dodgers team, the Dodgers have been over 100 wins how many times? I mean, in 77 and 78, they had better teams, and the Yankees beat them that year. But the Jays, not to my surprise, but the surprise of many, they were even competitive. I mean, it seems like everybody was expecting 12-0, 4 straight, just like the way the Brewers got beat by the Dodgers. But we have a series, right? It's a game apiece. You go to Los Angeles for 3. And the Blue Jays are road warriors. We know they're tough. They're not going to roll over. And I think this is a 6 or a 7 game series because, spoiler alert, the Blue Jays were better than the Dodgers for a 162 game season. If they had been in the same division as the Yankees and Blue Jays, the Dodgers are on the outside looking in. Because the Yankees and Jays ended with the same record, but the Dodgers only got to 93 wins, which is good. But this is not a team that's supposed to run through the postseason, blowing everybody out, a la, well, the 1999 Yankees. The 98 Yankees had some problems, as we know, in the championship series against Cleveland when the 114-win Yankees team went down 2-1. Andy Pettitte gave up 5 home runs in Game 3. The Yankees lost a terrible Game 2. Chuck Knobloch vapor-locked on the field at a play. And they lost in extras, and then we got blown out. I could still see hard-hitting Mark Whitten hitting bombs. Man, he hit a couple of monster home runs. And the Yankees were blown out of Game 3. And what? The season's over. We won 114 games, and we're about to go out in 5 to the Indians. This is disgusting. Steinbrenner's got to sell the team. We got to fire Torrey. Cashman's got to go. In 1998, Cashman had to go. And we need to rethink our organizational process, because if we can win 114 and get beaten by a not that great Cleveland team, what are we even doing here? Are we even trying? Or maybe we need an owner who wants to win. But now we've got a World Series this year. And 29 years ago tonight, on October 26th, 1996, was the night of Game 6 of the World Series. And there were all kinds of personal ironies and turns of plot, if you will, that did not happen, but there were pieces in place for certain turns of plot to happen, which actually had nothing to do with either myself or my dear old dad, Alan Philip Cohen, the biggest Yankee fan that any of us are ever going to know. My dad, born August 31st, 1942, not a boomer. Neither is my mom, born February of 1945. Sorry, Mom. But yes, my parents were part of what was called and is called the silent generation. They're not the greatest generation. They're not boomers. They're kind of in the middle, and I guess they don't talk that much. My dad talked a lot. My mom talks even more. But my dad's first fan season was 1951. He was a smart kid. Spoiler alert, big surprise, right? My dad was not as verbose as me, but he was very intelligent. And so by the time of 1951, the year in which my dad turned 9, he was watching every game of the World Series because they were on in the afternoon. What a concept, right? Got to do something for the fans. Yeah, we're going to put the games on as late as we can to get maximum eyeballs. It's the way it goes. But my dad's first fan season, 1951. A kind of pivotal year, I talked about it. That's the year the Giants made the 13-game comeback against the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Dodgers had yet to win a World Series, and the drums were beginning to beat. They need a new stadium in Brooklyn because Ebbets Field could only hold how many? 33,011 capacity seating. That's not a very big ballpark, Susan. And they only had 700 parking spaces. Well, why didn't they just expand? Good question. They didn't expand because there was nowhere to expand. That was the reason why the Dodgers had to move. So the Dodgers blew that lead in 51. Giants make the World Series, Bobby Thompson, the whole thing. The Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant. Most famous radio call in baseball history by the late Russ Hodges. And my dad watched Joe DiMaggio in his final season win a World Series, and Mickey Mantle, who was a rookie, rip up his knee in Game 1 trying to catch a ball. That was actually DiMaggio's ball, but manager Casey Stengel, who wasn't really anywhere near as old as he looked. Casey was one of those guys that when he was 40, looked like he was in his mid to late 60s already. But Casey had told Mickey, Joe doesn't move around that well in the outfield, kid. If you can get to the ball, you get the ball. Don't worry about Joe. So while Mickey was doing that, he hit his foot on a drain pipe, went down in a heap, and fucked up his knee, which was already fucked up because he had osteomyelitis as a child. But my dad got to see the Yankees win 1951, 1952, 1953, 56, 58, 61, 62, 77, and 78. So they hadn't won a World Series in 18 years, since 1978. And they hadn't been in a World Series since 1981, which was a fucking disaster because they didn't get swept. They won the first two, but then they lost 4 in a row. So including those 4 in a row, 9 World Series championships that my dad won since becoming a fan. Then they lost the first 2 to Atlanta. So, man, you want to talk about an ignominious record, losing 6 straight World Series games. Pass, do not recommend. But we didn't see the Yankees winning the 96 World Series. Well, symbolically, figuratively, going into the series, we were just hoping it was going to be competitive. Because the way the Braves had come back on a decent Cardinals team, again, when I say it's baseball, Susan, the Cardinals were not that good, and they actually had a 3-1 lead and an opportunity. And boy, were we rooting for the Cardinals because the Yankees matched up well with them. And we said, well, we're going to beat the Cardinals. They suck. How did they even get this far? Maybe they won 91 or 92, Maybe they won 93 games like this vaunted juggernaut, 2025, I almost said Brooklyn Dodgers, 2025 Dodgers team. I don't know. But the Braves came back on the Cardinals, and to their credit, none of the last 3 games of that series were competitive. They basically blew the Cardinals out 3 straight games to get to the World Series. And then as we talked about, the Yankees with all the momentum and all of the wind at their back, the Braves having had a tough series, the Yankees, not a very difficult series, thanks to Jeffrey Mayer helping us win Game 1. The Yankees beat the Orioles in 5. They won all 3 games in Baltimore, that Yankee team. They were road warriors again for Rio. They beat Texas twice in Texas. They won both games in Texas. And then they won all 3 in Baltimore. So the 1996 Yankees did not lose any games on the road. That's got to be some kind of a record. They won 8 games on the road in that postseason. 2 of those games started by Kenny Rogers and got blown out of the box. But we outscored him in Game 4 in Texas. Bernie switch hitting homers in the game. Rogers gets just blasted, but the Yankees outscore him. And in Game 4, it was a home run brigade after Rogers was KO'd. But here we are. We win incredible 3 straight white-knuckle games in Atlanta, right? We win Game 3. Bernie hits the home run late. Bernie, it seemed like he had a lot of big hits. I think he only had 3 hits in the whole World Series, but every hit was a big hit. He had the home run to put Game 3 out of reach and take all the air out of the crowd and all the air out of Joe Buck, if you believe the idea that even then Joe Buck was a Yankee hater. He didn't sound happy when he went down the line and right. Goodbye. Because I think he was probably hoping for a Brave sweep. And he also knew, well, I guess a funny thing is happening on the way to a Brave sweep. The Yankees are like, go fuck yourselves. We're not getting swept. F you. Game 4 was the 6-0 game where they rallied, and Jim Leyritz with the home run, and then the Yanks winning in extras. In Game 5, was Andy Pettit by the hair on his chinny chin, holding the Braves scoreless for 8 1/3 in a 1-0 game where John Smoltz pitched better than he had in game 1. The difference was the Braves got 12 runs in game 1. So when he gives up 1, great job by Smoltz. But in game 5, Marquise Grissom, the Braves messed up a play in the outfield. Cecil Fielder got another big hit. The Yanks scored 1 run and made it hold up. So a 1-0 game in game 5 of the World Series. It's basically Exhibit A, other than the 256 wins, why we love Andy Pettit as Yankee fans. Because that's going into the cauldron. He's 24 years old, and he throws 8 1/3 scoreless in a hostile environment in a game that's probably going to decide the World Series, because the reality is, and the announcers and all of the Yankee haters and the people who knew, hey, the Braves are a significantly better team, but this is a 7-game series, and we're seeing that anything can happen here. The sense was whoever won game 5 was going to win this World Series. And if the Yankees won this World Series, the Braves were in a world of hurt. Because all of that momentum, it kind of does mean something, even with Greg Maddux going in game 6. So the personal piece is that the off day was a Friday, and I always had Fridays off. This was my last academic semester at New York University. I walked with the class of 1997, but I always had Fridays off. And the off day, October 25th, 1996, the off day had Joe Torre's brother getting a heart transplant. And a little bit of tragedy. You know, Joe Torre, to my young eyes, he already looked like a really old guy. He wasn't really that old. Joe was maybe he was in his mid-50s in 1996, but he had been around baseball already for, 35 years. And he hadn't made a World Series. You know, we're talking about Don Mattingly now, 3 games away from winning his first ring, if it happens. But Torre, the guy was in his mid-50s. But Joe Torre's eldest brother, Rocco, had died earlier that year. And the other brother, Frank, who himself had been a terrific baseball player, he was dying. He needed a heart transplant. And it just so happened, a tragedy occurred. A young man from the Bronx, I think he died in, I don't know if it was a car accident, but he died some kind of an accident that was not a normal death. And it was a match. And on the off day between games 5 and 6, the manager of the New York Yankees' brother, who was dying after he had lost the first brother, and his sister is a nun, the brother gets a heart transplant. The city was just going, in the immortal words of Mike Francesa, the city was going gaga. And there's a lot of funny stuff on YouTube when Mike Francesa says gaga. They cut in images of Lady Gaga. Every time you see it, it's a riot. They're going gaga. My dad, before the 1996 postseason. Now, my dad was not really what you would call a baller, but he was, within normal parameters, he was a CPA, and he was very successful. He did really well for himself, and you could say his kids, But within normal parameters. He wasn't a multi-millionaire, but he was a guy who went about as far in the accounting business as you can go. He was good at his job. And for somebody who was very clearly on the autism spectrum, he was good with people. He had very underrated people skills. And this translated to him being very good at bringing in new clients and schmoozing clients. So it is a real thing to say there are people who happen to be gigantic fans of the New York Knicks, the New York Rangers, the Yankees, any state, any team in any sport. And they'll get really good season tickets. You don't have to own the whole plan. This is a thing that's gone on with corporate America, and it's not a criticism, for at least 5 decades, where you have somebody who owns a season ticket plan, and then they kind of divvy the tickets up among the people who have pieces of the plan, because there are companies who don't go to any of the games, where the principals don't go to any of the games. They simply spec individual games out, and maybe they charge a 10 or a 20% surcharge. It's completely illegal, but honestly, who cares? You want to go, you go. And if you have a way to get tickets, go ahead and fucking get them. No judgment. Again, no judgment. The judgment-free podcast, the Planet Fitness of podcasts. So my dad and his partners, one of whom is still working a partial schedule, Harold Schulman, which is just fucking crazy, and the late, great Mike First, my dad's 2 buddies, that was the SCF and Co days. The other Kramer and Rosen have passed. It's kind of sad that 4 of the 5 of them are gone because they were still so, I don't want to say young, but in their, early 50s to late 50s, or in the case of Kramer and Rosen, they were in their 60s 29 years ago. But Dad owned a piece of this season ticket plan through the business, and they paid through it. They, whatever there's tax write-offs, whatever they were supposed to do to get a little bit of a savings, they did it. But the idea was they had these unbelievable seats. The seats are probably $1,200 a game now. Now, they weren't cheap in 1996, especially not in the playoffs. What they used to do in the postseason, they doubled the face value of the tickets, that's all. And they would double how much it cost to park. So if parking was $40 in the lot closest to the old ballpark across the street from the new park, which is now 18 years old, if parking was $50 in 1996, it was now $100. So they still got you, even if they weren't charging as much actually per ticket. But the seats were about 30 feet up the first baseline and 6 rows back. Those are really good seats. I don't need to tell you. Maybe it was more like 40 or 50, because when I'm thinking about it, you were almost parallel to the pitcher's mound, that you were looking right at whoever the pitcher was. So Shulman, Cone First, Kramer and Rosen, SCF and Co., they used to get, they would get like 20 games a year out of the 81. And the theory was they were supposed to bring clients to these games to kind of show off a little bit, and it would help them to get business. And it worked. There were people who maybe would not have gone with them. They would have gone with a bigger firm, who ended up saying, you know what? These guys must be doing something right to get these freaking seats. This is amazing. It's a good look. So going into the 1996 World Series, the company that owned the season ticket plan, asked my dad and Hal and all the guys, Roy Kramer, that was the SCF and Co. But at that time it was still, I think, Shulman, Cone First, Kramer and Rosen. But the 5 principals, including my father, they went to, the office was a couple of blocks away, I forgot where they were, and they met with these guys, and the guys actually had the physical World Series tickets. I wish I had it. I don't know what my dad did with it, but they had the physical World Series tickets. And the way that it worked out was, each of these 5 guys had long since been guaranteed 1 game in the 1996 postseason. Now, if you know anything about baseball, think about this. How can you guarantee that you're going to see a game in the postseason? The only way to do that is to take tickets for the division series. First 2 games are going to be in the Bronx, and if need be, game 5. So 2 of the partners didn't think the Yankees were long for the postseason. Kramer and Rosen, this would be the 2 older guys. Bernie was born in about 1915 or something, so he might have actually gone to some World Series games in the 30s and 40s. Now, Bernie's been gone about 15 years now. He lived a long life. He was basically my grandfather's age. So Kramer and Rosen, Roy took game 1, Bernie took game 2 of the division series against Texas. So the 3 remaining tickets at that point were game 1 of the American League Championship Series, which, again, if the Yankees don't get by Texas, you can have the ticket. The ticket is useless if there's no series, right? I mean, it's not something you would automatically think about. I would, but the average person, that wouldn't be the first thought process. Oh, I just got tickets to the LCS. Bro, they got to get there first. You're going to have a nice souvenir, right? So Hal Shulman took game 1, and there were 2 tickets left for my dad and Mike First. My dad was the one who was asked, next, what would you like? The other choice was game 7 of the World Series. So you haven't even started the playoffs, and you're being offered game 7 of the 1996 World Series in these now 1,200 or more seats. It might be 2,400 in postseason, because I think the face value is 1,200 for where these are. That's how close you are. Championship suites, legend suites, whatever they call it. It's just crazy. So my father, who was as tight as anyone, when it came to taking chances, he was risk averse. He was risk averse. Where do you think I get it from? I didn't get it in a vacuum. My default setting, turn around and run. In any kind of a conflict, not wanting to talk to a teacher if they thought they were going to yell at me, hey, go fuck yourself. But my father was feeling, I guess he was feeling lucky. And he asked, do you have Game 7 of the World Series? And they laughed. They said, well, we told you we did. He said, well, maybe you didn't still. Because the guys knew pretty much what they had available. So my dad turned to his partner, Mike, and says, well, Mike, was it your plan to take the championship series all along, or words to that effect? And Mike said, yeah, of course. They're not getting to the World Series, Al. And even if they do, it's not going 7. They're going to lose, and maybe they'll lose in 5. If they even get there. Got to be crazy to take Game 7. So my dad, and I'll never forget when he came home, this was, like before the postseason started, and he had 2 tickets to Game 7 of the 1996 World Series. So now you understand the mindset. Going into Game 6, the Yanks can end the World Series. I was not the slightest bit torn. Yeah, it would have been great to have been gone to Game 6 of the 1996 World Series, but that one was not available by the time they talked to my dad and Hal Schulman and Roy Kramer and Mike First and Bernie Rosen. All they had left was Game 2 of the ALCS, which the Yanks ended. That was the one game the Orioles got in that series, and Game 7. So my dad shrugged his shoulders, said, let's fucking go. He didn't say that. I doubt he said that. And my dad got 2 tickets for Game 7 of the World Series. When they won Game 5, that suddenly made it possible the Yankees could win the World Series before Game 7. The Braves would have been able to win the World Series before Game 7 because statistically, if you get to 2 games apiece, you're in an area where it's probably better than 50-50 that you're going to have a Game 7, right? I mean, again, statistically speaking. So my father, who was, if anything, a bigger Yankees fan than me, he kind of wanted the Yankees to lose Game 6. He never would have said it that way, but he kept saying, how incredible would it be to go to a Game 7? The Yankees hadn't played a Game 7 in a World Series since '64, which they lost. And the last Game 7 they played before that, I guess, was 1960. They had a Game 7 in 1960 and 1962 and 58. Man, they played a lot of Game 7s, didn't they? Jesus. Dad was torn. He didn't exactly want the Yankees to lose. But he kept thinking about what it would mean, even though he didn't verbalize it this way either. My dad was 54, and he could have been sitting with his son in those seats to watch a Game 7. But in my mind, as pessimistic as he could be, I didn't want any part of a Game 7. Let's go out and win 15-0 tonight. Let's have a nice, easy win. Cecil hits 3 home runs. Jimmy Key goes 6, and then Mariano for 2. Weather. Don't take any chances. Just beat him. I don't want to see a Game 7. Can't you just think about what it'd be like? Yeah, maybe we'll lose 10-0 in Game 7. It could be like the 1985 World Series. Don Denkinger makes that, it's still a worse call given the circumstance. Jorge Orta was out by a half a step from here to there. They called him safe. No instant replay in 1985. And guess who wins the World Series? The next night, the Cardinals got blown out of the building. You lose a Game 6 that you're supposed to win, or you have a chance to win, and maybe you just go out and get beat up in Game 7. So with me, in the immortal words of Darth Vader, there is no conflict. Dad, I just want to win this game. Let's win a World Series. The last time we won a World Series, I was 4. I don't remember it. I think my parents said they put me in front of the TV after Reggie Jackson hit the 3rd homer in Game 6 of the 1977 World Series. So my dad, we had Game 7, but he was not around. He was visiting his lady friend near White Plains. She lived not that far. Yeah, she lived in White Plains at the time. So I went to my mother's house to watch Game 6, the house where I grew up in Massapequa. And my mom she saw so many games, but she wasn't really a baseball fan. And my mom's guy at the time as I talked about, the funniest person I've ever met in my life. He was a Met fan. So he actually was a baseball fan, but he was kind of low-key rooting for the Yankees to lose because he's a National League guy. You know, he grew up in Spanish Harlem. He didn't want the Yankees to win, but he was not like in my face or anything like that. He was funny. We were having a lot of laughs, and my sister was there too. So as crazy as the crowd was going into Game 1 of the '96 World Series, the mood, and you could tell this from TV, was different. It really felt as if this was a coronation about to happen. That there was no way, with everything that had happened, with the way the Yankees got blown out of the first 2 games, went to Atlanta and won 3 white knucklers. Every game in Atlanta was torturous. I mean, there were years where the Yankees won a World Series where there were a lot of kind of easy or easy-ish games. Like 1998, Game 1 was a white knuckler. Game 2 was a blowout. Game 3 was close. Game 4, we kind of won going away. You know, where you didn't feel like the Padres had any chance. But that's usually kind of the exception. Normally, World Series games are tough. You don't get that many blowouts. That's why Game 2 of the '98 World Series is such an outlier. I think we faced Andy Ashby. The Yankees just beat the shit out of him. They won like 9-1 or something. The game wasn't even competitive. You just had a feeling. Even though Maddox was pitching against Jimmy Key, and Jimmy Key was, and I loved him, but he was pretty much past it at this point in time. We were lucky to be able to trade him for David Wells, who was somehow still in his prime, even though he and Key were just about the same age. So the Key looked okay early, and the Yankees in the, I think it was the bottom of the 4th. It was either the bottom of the 3rd or the bottom of the 4th. The Yankees put up 3 runs. Joe Girardi hit a triple. Marquise Grissom was playing Little League depth. You know, the Yankees just trying to scratch a run across and, you know, take the lead and let's see what happens. They had a man on 3rd and 1 out off Maddox, which you also right there thought was miraculous. And Marquise Grissom in center, he was playing Little League depth, and he hit a ball. It could have been a home run in a different park. He hit a ball over Grissom's head. So not only does the runner on 3rd score, he's standing on 3rd now with 1 out. And Bernie gets a hit. Jeter gets a hit. And before you know it, it's 3-0. And you just felt like there's no way we're going to lose this game. The Braves rallied in, I think, the top of the 5th. And they got a run. And they had bases loaded, 1 out. And a player who had been, you know, almost a Hall of Fame caliber player in his prime, you know, MVP candidate. I don't know, did he win one? But Terry Pendleton was a tremendous player, but now he was kind of past it. And in what was basically the biggest moment of the first part of the game, hit into a double play. So the Yankees got out of that inning up 3-1. They just couldn't get anything going offensively. It was still a great Braves pitching staff. And the Yankees had like these hold-the-fort relievers, guys like Graham Lloyd and David Weathers. They just wanted to get to the 7th inning with a lead because you had a rested Mariano Rivera ready to go for 2 innings. And then hopefully Wetland would come out there and have his, you know, have his command and his stuff. He didn't have quite the stuff that he did in the early to mid 90s when he was with the Montreal Expos. He was still pretty good, but he was not infallible. Prime Wetland was, you know, Hall of Fame caliber pitcher, but he was a little bit past it, and you never felt entirely comfortable with him on the mound. So the least likely thing to happen was that Rivera was going to get hit, and he didn't. Mariano was, he was untouchable. He threw 2 scoreless innings. I don't think the Braves got any base runners, and I believe he struck out 4 in the 7th and 8th. And you don't know what career somebody's going to have. You don't know if Mariano Rivera is going to have a great career or whether he's going to be somebody who flames out a la Eric Gagne, Eric Gagne had a stretch where he was even more dominant than Mariano. What did he have, 70-something consecutive saves? Just ridiculous stuff, literally and figuratively. And then Gagne's career went off the cliff. So when Mariano got the last out in the 8th inning, the Yankees were going to be coming up to bat with a 3-1 lead, needing just 3 outs. Maybe we'll finally score some more runs. I didn't think there was any chance we were going to score some more runs. But Mariano, if you watch the video of him coming off the mound in the 8th inning, it takes him a lot longer to get back to home plate, back to the dugout from the mound. He was walking so slowly, as if he was just trying to form sense memory, core memory, something that he, for the rest of his life, and I'm sure he could always go back to and remember what it was like 56,000 plus, screaming at the top of their lungs because he had just done his job as well as you can. I mean, you're throwing 2 scoreless innings, you're not walking anybody, and you got 4 or 5 strikeouts. You're making an all-star laden lineup look like they're in A-ball. That's pretty impressive. So history tells us that the Braves did rally in the 9th. They scored a run with 2 outs. Marquise Grissom hit a single to right field. It was one of those where if the fielder, a la Bobby Richardson in the '62 World Series, the game ended with Richardson not thinking that Ralph Terry was ready to pitch. It was 2nd and 3rd, 2 outs. And Bobby Richardson was standing at least 20 feet from where he was supposed to be and didn't think that Terry was going to pitch. And before he could scramble back to where he was supposed to be, Terry pitched and Willie McCovey hit the ball right to Bobby Richardson. If Bobby Richardson is playing where he's supposed to be, the Yankees do not win the 1962 World Series. They lose. Again, the franchise just had so much fairy dust over the years. But Marquise Grissom managed to shoot one through the right side. And 1st and 2nd, 2 outs, Yankees up a run. And a guy who had had a huge World Series in 1995, Mark Lemke, they didn't call him Little October for nothing. He had an enormous World Series with them beating, in that instance, a far superior Cleveland team. Cleveland would have won 112 to 115 games that year. They won 100 in a 144-game season. They were dominant. Albert Bell hit 50 home runs in 144 games. The guy was out of his mind. He was so good. So Grissom hits this single. It's 3-2, and here's Mark Lemke. And the count gets to 2-2, and Lemke hits a pop foul. It looks like Charlie Hayes is going to have a play, but he kind of staggers near the dugout. And not surprisingly, we saw the play with McMahon in the Red Sox series this year, where the Red Sox players, they're not going to help the guy to make a catch. So Hayes kind of stutter steps, and he doesn't make the catch. He's lucky he didn't hurt himself. So on a 3-2 pitch, 1st and 2nd, 2 out, Yankees up a run. You can't walk this guy, because then the winning run goes to second base and then a single, and suddenly you're going to be losing this game with only 3 outs to go. Again, you always imagine the worst case scenario as a fan, whether your team is great or not. You don't know, at least I never automatically, we'll just win, no problem. Lemke hit another pop-up. It looked exactly like the first pop-up. And Hayes made the move, went over, and said, this ball's out of play. Just as Charlie got to within a few, maybe 2 steps of the Braves dugout, he stopped moving. And if you watch the video of this, you will see Derek Jeter, who came over just in case. Derek was a guy who was always going to do more than he had to, just in case, like the famous shovel pass in 2001, where he did something I never saw before and nobody ever saw. He was in the middle of nowhere, but he could see that the relay throw was over. It was overthrown. So he moved to a spot where the shortstop would never be and did this shovel pass. Well, in this instance, Jeter ran over with Hayes just in case Hayes suddenly couldn't find the ball. Jeter figured, well, I'll be able to make the catch. It's just the way that the guy was wired. So when Hayes stopped moving, it's almost like everything came to a halt for a split second. Because what that meant was he's got to play. And if a major league fielder has a play where his feet are set, the odds that he drops it are very, very slim. I would say that Hayes makes that catch probably 1,000 times in a row, because a high school kid is arguably not dropping that very often either. And now you have a professional at the top of a sport. So when Hayes stopped moving his feet, he almost immediately went like that. Tapped his glove. Not every fielder does it, but a lot of fielders do it. It's almost like a timing mechanism. When you're ready to make a catch, you tap your glove and you put your hand up. And if you watch the video, when Charlie Hayes taps his glove with his throwing hand, Derek Jeter starts celebrating. Derek Jeter starts celebrating before the catch is made, because Derek Jeter, rookie that year, already knows enough about baseball at age 22. He's not dropping this ball. If he's hitting his glove, he's making the catch. So Hayes hits his glove. Derek jumps. And I start screaming, he's got it. He's got it. And sure enough, ball comes down. Hayes catches it cleanly. And the pandemonium Pandemonium, in the words of the great Gorilla Monsoon, pandemonium ensues. There wasn't as much of a rush to the field as 20 years earlier when Chambliss hit the walk-off. It's like 1976 seemed a lot further in the past. It seemed a lot further in the past than 20 years. It doesn't feel like Chambliss's homer was the same distance as the 2005 postseason where we flamed out against the Angels. But the celebration was crazy. And there was no equivocation. I was just beyond thrilled that we had won the World Series. Like, how the hell did we win this series, dropping the first two? I mean, people thought it was 90% before the series started that the Braves, like, that's how much better. 13 or 14 games better in the regular season, had the amazing run and rally against the Cardinals. Head of steam, blow us out the first two games. But I will tell you, I didn't get to celebrate with my dad because he was in White Plains. But when he came home, he said, I really did want a Game 7, but I'm happy we won the World Series. But man, how great would that have been if we had gone to a Game 7? I said, well, maybe you should have lobbied for Game 6. He's no. The Game 6, they had 4 seats for a Game 6. They had again, multiple corporations that owned pieces of the plan. Whatever allowed them to make the most money from each of these people. But there was always a little part of him that wanted to see a Game 7. Sitting that close. It would have been, for somebody who had already been a Yankee fan for 45 years, it would have been sort of a capper. From a 9-year-old kid to now, I guess, and again, my dad never talked like this. This is me editorializing. A successful professional getting to take his son and sit in these seats. Game 7 of the World Series. It's kind of a cool way of looking at it. The first kid in the family to go to college. My dad was, my grandfather was incredibly successful. He never got to go to college because when he got out of high school, well, he started working in a machine shop. But that's neither here nor there. Game 6 of the 1996 World Series. I mean, it's arguably the greatest day in New York sports history because of the circumstances, because of the personalities, because of the fact that the Braves were clearly a superior team and the Yankees won all 3 in Atlanta and came home. And Joe Torre's brother getting the heart transplant. It's just so many different things. That is my singular fan moment. Game 6 of the World Series. And obviously in a different version of the Matrix, if the Yanks lose that game and we go to Game 7 and end up winning, that would be. But I am grateful that we even had the opportunity to think about the fact that, well, if we lose, at least we're going to Game 7. I mean, it's so stupid if we lose. Fuck that. Just unbelievable. But sometimes it feels like it's longer than 29 years ago. I mean, a long time since I've been in college, right? 29 years. But October 26, 1996, the New York Yankees hosting the Atlanta Braves back in the Bronx 5 days after they had gotten blown out for a second consecutive game. If a 4-0 game feels like a blowout when you're up against Greg Maddux and you got its 8 ground balls to the pitcher. That's all you could do was hit toppers back to the mound. October 26, 1996, the New York Yankees secured their first World Series championship in 18 years and the 23rd in franchise history. Thanks for joining me. This has been episode 635 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your early Sunday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, and the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.